It really just said that. Now recording.
Man, I'm gonna mute this bitch.
Yeah, you can mute the bot. I just need to
Yeah,
know if it's recording or not.
fuck the bot. All my homies hate the bot.
Oh man. So we were going to talk about Need for Speed, weren't it?
Hmm,
Where do we even begin with the franchise and what it's turned into?
that's a very good question. I
I
mean,
mean,
okay, so obviously we can start it off like this. Obviously you are already in the know that I'm working on a video about the
yeah,
franchise itself and how it kind of got into the wrong direction of sorts.
yeah,
It's like this. The basic resentment is that the community is basically split in two sides, where one is actually thinking that Unbound, the recent one, has been very good. You know, despite the story and just the marketing overall, it had been something worth their while and also their experience and investing time, etc.
yeah,
On the other hand, you have people that are saying this game fucking sucks.
yeah, yeah. So where do you sit on that ladder or that sort of area? Like where do you sit at the moment? Because I'm generally of the opinion that Unbound is a terrible game. I think there's a lot about it that because I haven't played it yet per se, but there's a lot about it that could have been so much better. The art style direction is definitely interesting to say the least, but um, I just am not a huge fan of the. This essentially has to be a repeated version of Need for Speed Heat. Um, I always enjoyed the anonymity of the protagonists in Need for Speed games. I think that's like what really brought Need for Speed together. Yeah, with Need for Speed 2015 as an example, I think, we don't know who the protagonist is. So we can sit in the shoes of the protagonist. Like by technicality, we are the protagonist.
Hmm.
Um, and I liked that about Underground 2, Most Wanted, and Carbon, and by extension, future games after that outside of, I think it was Rush. I can't remember the top of my head where we actually had an active protagonist for that game.
Oh,
I've
you
always
mean the
enjoyed,
run?
yeah, the run. That's it. I've always enjoyed the aspect that maybe these protagonists don't need to be named, or um, maybe these protagonists need to remain anonymous. Like we don't need to create our character within this game because we know we are playing um, a car game where we can sit in the shoes of these, the protagonist of the game, and it's always fun when games are like that.
Yeah. Um, to get back to your question as to where I'm sitting at, honestly, uh, as someone who has played Unbound and gotten back into it recently, just checking it out after like time has passed, the game has been
Yeah,
sitting and just updating in the background ever since I've stopped playing it. I will say that most of the ideas and also criticism still hasn't been addressed properly.
mm,
And even though, despite the fact that I've done research upon, just developers talking about the game itself as to their aspirations for it and what the future holds, uh, I am hopeful that they follow through with their plans that they have set down. It's more or less that the game is just not something I would actually spend $70 on. I mean,
yeah,
obviously you have EA Pass and or EA Play or whatever it's called. The
yeah,
subscription, and I still don't want to invest time or money into that. You know,
yeah,
I think that Unbound has just suffered a lot from just the entire marketing, where most people hadn't even heard about it. It's, like I genuinely heard about it because you told me about it.
mm,
That's how bad it was.
yeah, yeah. Like I even then, like going off of your point, I only heard about it because a friend had actually told me about it as well. So I wouldn't have actually found out that a new Need for Speed game was going to be coming out until I want to say um like what? before the game even came out, like 2-3 months before the game came out. And even then, I had seen no real indication of gameplay or anything of the sort. All I knew was Travis Scott is going to be in it, and he's going to be playing a character in it, and you know that was just the main advertising for the game, which is, in hindsight, the game just does not look that good. But
Mm.
like I said, the art style direction was a unique idea, but you know, in hindsight, come on, there's so much more that the studio could have done for the game to make it so much more appealing. I mean, for crying out loud, it's a car game. I
Yeah.
know Need for Speed games are known for like, some form of story, but it's a car game, and the reason Most Wanted and Carbon were both so successful is because they tied so well into each other. I feel like with Unbound and Heat, they don't really tie that well into each other. They just sort of do their own thing. Um, they don't really address what happened in Heat,
Mm.
and you're not exactly playing the same character. You're playing a totally different character that you're making from scratch.
Yeah.
Which I feel like if they tied both those games together, and maybe if we went back to I forgot what the place was called in Most Wanted again.
Rockport.
Rockport, that's it. If we went back to Rockport and if we got like some form of understanding about what happened after our protagonist from Most Wanted became Most Wanted,
Mm.
it would have been so much more interesting. It would have made the game story more interesting as well.
Yeah.
But it seems like recently Need for Speed games are trying to become more story heavy and not sort of focused on the gameplay as much. Because I feel like he did a good thing with the gameplay. The cars felt decently fast. The customizability was very lackluster though.
Mm.
There wasn't really much there. Whereas with Carbon, the customizability and even in Most Wanted, the customizability was just great. You could
Mm.
have fun with all of that. But he just sort of presented bare bones customization at the least. I wouldn't know about Unbound in any way, so you'd have to let me know how that works. But I think he did a good job of the racing and playing races and creating fast cars and stuff. But there's a lot that he could have also done, and I think the same could really be said for Unbound as well.
Mm. Well, to tackle a couple of points that I've just like put on the side whilst you were talking. First things first, it wasn't Travis Scott, it was A$AP Rocky that was
Oh
presented
boy.
in a yeah, and what's funny about that is that A$AP Rocky isn't necessarily known to be a car guy, especially when you look at his collection, which is mainly just luxurious cars, right?
Yeah.
And most of the time you just see like Rolls Royces and all.
Mm.
And from a car guy or a culture perspective, this doesn't really portray the feeling of someone being actually associated with cars in general or just like the need for speed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we've gotten the Mercedes now that is on the front cover of Unbound that A$AP
Mm.
has also used in one of his music videos. But aside the point, what's most funny is that A$AP is also friends with Tyler, the Creator, which would have been
Mm.
a way better fit. If you look at his car collection, then you can see that this guy is actually a car guy.
Yeah.
So it's a very weird decision that they have taken to involve A$AP Rocky over Tyler, and it brings up many questions as well, especially when you take into consideration that there's a segment where you're just cruising with A$AP Rocky in the same car, and he is for some reason having a monologue about his life and saying, I'm just a guy, just like everybody else, trying to be relatable to the audience when that just falls on deaf ears and more or less seems like he is out of touch, to be fair.
Mm.
So aside from that, another thing that you mentioned is like how Most Wanted and Carbon were just tying into each other. Carbon being the prequel slash sequel to Most Wanted.
Yeah.
And I think that this certainly can be a valid point, but taking into consideration that many see the golden era of Need for Speed to be like starting from Underground 1
Mm.
and just like, Underground 2 building off of Underground 1 and then Most Wanted building off of those two and just adding on top, police chases, which have been very requested at the time, and also giving more of a reason to like expand upon the overall feel and just the world building itself. And spicing up the gameplay to some degree as well, because you have now different factors weighing in on your gameplay, right? So when you get
Yeah.
impounded 3 times, your car is just gone and you'll have to start over again. Or if you have a different car, then you'll have to use that one instead.
Yeah.
And I think that while Heat did a lot of great things, Unbound is just taking most of, like, say 60 to 70% of the gameplay and just the cars overall, adding a little bit, but not enough for it to differentiate itself, which is why they have decided, you know what, let's go with a different city, with a different feel to it. Maybe this will spice up things for the audiences, but it's just not enough, man. I've tried to actually have a proper cop chase in one of the gameplay sessions that I had.
Mm.
Bro, I'm playing on the hardest difficulty, and I kid you not, one fucking cop was on my tail.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like there's no to some extent there is no ambition with Need for Speed at the moment. Like you said, with that one cop on your tail, how are you meant to do anything about that? Heat was relatively the same as well. You could look on your mini map and there'll be like 5 cops chasing you, but it's only just one who's
Mm,
actually like right behind you. It's like each cop takes a turn to chase you. Whereas with Most Wanted and Carbon, you had like 5 cops on you all times. They were chasing you. They would get in front of you. They would, crash your car. They would smash it in. Hot Pursuit was the same too.
mm,
Um, Hot Pursuit is a brilliant example, for me at least, where Criterion did something very good with the game.
mm,
Um, and props to Criterion, where props is due. Um, because Hot Pursuit was a phenomenal game. I remember playing that religiously as a kid, even now, playing it religiously, trying to 100% the game and get gold on every single race was just a fun experience. And Criterion obviously went down the more realistic route with Hot Pursuit.
yeah.
But the cop chases in that game was so fun. Trying to avoid them during a race or trying to complete a race and you have this like Bugatti Veyron just right on your tail, like the fastest car in the game right on your tail. You're trying to avoid them, and they're always either in front of you or the back of you or on the side of you. They're always somewhere. And like even with Most Wanted, like you had like 10 cops chasing you at one point, and that was towards the end of the game as well. And there was always a roadblock, and after the roadblock, they would chase after you. Same could be
Mm,
said about Carbon as well. And my memories of Carbon, the canyon races were so fun. Having that difficulty curve for me as a kid was so fun. Is trying to do that canyon race and having the learning curve to do those and everything along those lines. It was so much fun. And the cop chases after a race as well were like you couldn't escape pretty much. You had to try to escape in like I want to call them hot zones where you could just hide and they wouldn't be able to find you. But if they found you in there, that's it. The hot zone's invalid. You got to go find another one. It's that's just how fun it was. But
yeah.
it feels like with Heat and Unbound, it's very hard to get captured. It is very hard to get captured because there's so many ways to evade the cops. You either be faster than them, or you just hide.
Yeah.
But most of the time, you're always faster than them. So just turns into a whole, when are things going to pick up from Need for Speed? What's going to happen to the franchise? And you did message this in the chat as well. Um, but there's a whole battle pass now going on for a car game. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, to elaborate on that, because I have looked at the service level of the speed pass, as they're calling it,
Mm,
there's actually a bit more to it. So Apparently, from like some update, they've decided, you know what, we're going to introduce some kind of progression system, which is the
Right.
speed pass, right? And you have the free tier and the premium tier. And essentially, these are just like the update or the update that everybody is getting for free.
Yeah.
And if you decide to essentially spend money on like maybe $10 or so, I believe one of them costs, you'll get access to even more items than the usual update route.
So
And
is it mainly just cosmetics then?
well, cosmetics and also cars.
Right.
Meaning, like for instance, with the most recent one, there's like old Audis that you can get for free in the free tier,
Mm.
and also newer models of the same manufacturer,
Yeah.
and that would be on the premium tier. So there is some kind of segment of FOMO being interacted into a full price game already.
Right. Huh. See, I would understand it more if the game in itself was like, if all the cars were readily available and it was just cosmetics only to make your car look a bit better. But if you're going to be paying a battle pass just to get a new car, then like, come on, what are you doing?
The thing is that they have car packs that you can buy, just like with
Mm.
Forza, for instance. Where it's just essentially like DLC. You'll get the car as soon as you purchase the thing, and that's it.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah,
Annoying, but interesting.
yeah, annoying but interesting. It's just like, what is even going on at this point? I mean, sure, people can argue that it's going to be used as support for the developers, to progress the development of the game, or at least like support in some capacity.
Yeah.
But come on, man. Like, I'm getting sick and tired of battle passes in being in AAA games when we have so many free-to-play alternatives that
Yeah.
offer you a way more value and also a greater experience by simply allowing you to access it for free. And then you can
Yeah.
also choose whether or not you want to purchase something and to like, essentially get a bit more out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Apex as an example. I mean, the battle pass. You have your free tiers and you have your pay tiers. A lot of what is in Apex is cosmetics only,
Mm,
um, and maybe some stuff to buy the new legends as well. But even then, like you can still get the legends just by leveling up. It will take about 15 levels roughly just to get a legend, and
mm,
people can easily grind that out. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, Even Fortnite, as an example, you still get V-Bucks for the free battle pass, and when you get enough, you can eventually get like the actual battle pass, and they always give you enough to get the next season as well,
mm.
which is what I find to be very cool about Fortnite as a game with the battle pass system. Not every battle pass system does that. Halo Infinite, multiplayer at least, much to my distaste, the game is very clunky, to be honest. I don't really like the multiplayer aspect of the game.
Yeah.
But that may be because I'm not like a Halo. Well, I am a Halo old head, but I'm not a Halo multiplayer old head. So I wouldn't know how it feels
Mm,
to play Halo multiplayer. Um, you know, Back when it hit its peak with Halo 3, Halo Reach, you name it. Um, you know, Halo Infinite's multiplayer battle pass is very interesting because you can get prior battle passes and still get currency from them. Obviously, there's a select few that you can't, but people always save them for last and then get on with it.
yeah.
But with Need for Speed, it feels as though it should really just be cosmetics only, and then cars should always be like readily added onto the free section instead of being a premium section,
Mm,
because it feels like with the BMW from Most Wanted, they're going to eventually add that onto the pay to win battle pass, and that will likely be the last speed pass that is ever created. But it's Unbound generally just doesn't feel like a good game at the moment. Um, and it does have a pretty, somewhat large player base, but it's a very disappointing game. It's not really a return to the Need for Speed formula that we're used to per se.
Mm. Thing is, even then, when the developer talk was happening, the recent one, I think somebody said that they couldn't necessarily restructure the whole game to fix some of the criticism that the community has brought.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker. There is a mod that has been recently uploaded that quite literally takes care of everything that was criticized when it came to Unbound. And literally just enhances the experience to such a degree where you could think that it's an actual proper good game where you get a proper sense of speed.
Mm.
And it's called Unite Unbound. And bro, if modders are taking better care of your game and you're sitting there with your AAA budget and whatnot, and you're saying, oh, we can't necessarily implement these utilities into single player experience, what the fuck are you even doing?
Mm. Exactly. You're coming up with excuses at that point, and modders are known to be able to produce this stuff, and people like devs can easily turn around, oh, but they have the time to, they're not getting paid to do it, they're just doing it out of their own, whim. They want the game to be better and experience it better. Sure, that could be a presented argument. However, there comes a point where you got to sit down and go, the modders are doing a good job. Why can't we just hire the modders, put them on our team, pay them a good amount of money? Like, don't pay them crap. They don't deserve garbage.
Mm,
You don't deserve to pay them $2 an hour for the modding work that they're going to be doing and fixing your game.
yeah.
The modders are fixing your game so it's more playable. I mean, with GTA San Andreas as an example, they fixed that game, fixed the code, and imported it over to next gen PCs and stuff. Um, they fixed everything really, and it's it says a lot about modders and developers really. I mean, Minecraft, good example. How many mods have come up for Minecraft since its early days? Really, it's one of the strongest games going even to this day, and there's still like RL Craft, Better Minecraft as well. That's a recent mod that's been going around. All these modders creating mobs that Mojang could easily create into the game. And you brought up Need for Speed now. That Need for Speed modders are fixing the game for the developers. So developers need to seriously start looking into hiring modders to help fix their game and help add more features to the game that can be interesting, instead of just going, they're modders, they don't deserve anything from us. They're helping you. They're making your game more playable. You need to start looking at these people for help. You don't just sit there and abandon them and go, you're modders, we're going to sue you now. Don't do that. They're there to help you. Like, I'm an advocate for modders. It really depends on the mod, unless, of course, it's a Xenoverse 2 mod, in which case, there's a lot of mods there that are quite interesting,
Yeah.
such as that one Broly mod.
Mm,
And I'm pretty sure everyone knows what I'm talking about there.
mm,
But the modders are helping you fix your game. You need to help. You need to help them and hire them and go. Look, we'll pay you this much. Help us. Pay them for their work. Pay them a decent hourly rate. And I know income is not very easy to come by, but you got to set a budget for yourself for these games.
mm,
Helldivers 2 is so successful because there was that budget set, and they've invested time into fixing the game too.
mm,
That's the main reason Helldivers 2 is so successful. The only reason Unbound isn't so successful is because obviously EA is the publisher, they're not providing enough funding. That, alongside the fact that the developers, because they're not being provided enough funding, aren't having enough time to create a good game. And they're always given a time limit. If developers got a little bit more time and maybe a little bit more creative, maybe we could see more. And if they hired modders to help with the fixing process, it would be even better. But that's generally just my opinion on the whole process. Really, I don't know if developers would even want to hire modders to do that, but it's totally up to them.
I think that there is a pretty good chance that developers could possibly seek out the help of modders. And just to clarify a couple of things, like for instance with GTA and Minecraft that you've mentioned, those games are pretty good, and they essentially have been programmed in a very stable, a stable version. So
Yeah,
the only mods that have been implemented were essentially just expanding on the experience that was already provided. It
yeah,
wasn't necessarily fixing the game. It was more or less like, just adding more stuff for you to follow or just enjoy. However, like for instance, when it comes to EA in particular, and I have watched the video earlier today where somebody was talking about that there was actually supposed to be a follow-up to the Dead Space remake, like
yeah,
a proper new entry, which is not just Dead Space 2 remake or whatnot. And ultimately, that thing has been canceled. And bear in mind that this is also EA we're talking about. EA just seems to have like this weird, I guess, like habit of just canceling games or just focusing on one game, then just going and moving forward. Where they're essentially like, okay, here's a new Battlefield. Oh fuck, that flopped. Let's get some guys from Criterion to just help them out, And Need for Speed is currently just on ice at the moment. But oh, guess what? You guys that remained, you'll just keep putting out updates on the game, etc. We don't really care. Anyways, Battlefield.
yeah,
So there's a lot of sentiment for EA to just improve their marketing and just business practices, because as it stands at the moment, it's not very balanced at all. Like there are certainly weird directions being taken, and I feel that when it comes to mods, we also need to take into consideration what kind of profit do they bring in, right? Let's take a look at Tekken, for instance, which is, as you already know, in such a controversial state because of the modding scene, where
yeah,
it's like, we're getting channel terminations and side owners of the official Tekken mods page, right? Which is not affiliated with Bandai Namco, bear in mind. Bandai Namco is going out of their way and being like, hey, yo, you need to take this down from your side. Even though, you know, in the email I'm trying to recall, they said, you're trying to advertise this site as a whole to be an official, sponsored, and endorsed product that is, providing a free experience to Tekken and the Bandai Namco sponsored brand as a whole, when that is
yeah,
not the case. And they're essentially killing off the modding scene by just going at them, targeting them. And the community is just like going very crazy about it, because people are saying this is happening because of the shop and the battle pass that they've implemented, as
mm,
they're seeing a direct competition towards their own monetization systems.
right. I mean, that would make the most sense as well. Like, if it's direct competition to your product, then you kind of want to, shut it down, really. But the modding scene for Tekken's always been like great as well. They're not making any profit from it. These guys are doing it for free.
Mm.
Like, Bandai, what are you doing? At this point, it's like Bandai's probably going to shut down Xenoverse mods as well. And Xenoverse mods are really, really good. Like, both the first and second games mods are pretty good. Um, but if they're going to start doing this with Tekken, then they're going to start doing it with other games that are owned by them as well. Is that's not very that's not a very good business practice.
Yeah, I mean, like if you take a look at the comment section on Sparking Zero, right? People already have been asking, is there going to be a local multiplayer, or at
Mm,
least local versus modes? So you already have this fear integrated into the community or just like the gaming industry where people are questioning, okay, is this thing going to have features that we have seen on the previous games before that we've taken as granted? And
Yeah,
this is also a reason as to why I am going to withhold from buying Sparking Zero, because I genuinely am wondering whether or not they're going to pull the same thing that they have done with Crash Kart or Crash
yeah.
Bandicoot Kart Racing and Tekken, where they have just implemented monetization systems after the public release of a game. So I'm genuinely wondering whether or not it's going to roll out also like 2 months later into its lifespan, and then you all
Yeah.
of a sudden you'll have this free and premium battle pass shit, where in the premium battle pass shit you have Goku and Vegeta Saiyan armor.
Yeah, it's just turning into a whole in every game now as well. Like it's turning into a battle pass fiasco
Mm,
where a battle pass has to be implemented into the game for it to be successful, but that's not the case. DLC was invented for a reason. You know, you buy the DLC and you expand the game.
mm,
Like if Elden Ring implemented a battle pass for the next expansion, I would not be buying the DLC because I don't stand by the idea that a battle pass has to be implemented into every game. And I know Miyazaki would never do that. I hope, um, but
oh boy.
it turns into a whole thing in itself.
Yeah, I mean, like you've said, there is a whole lot of implementation of this fucking system, and the question really boils down to as to when it becomes too much, right?
Yeah, yeah. Like, where do we draw the line with this system? When does it stop? Does it need to be in every game? Um, like, how do we stop it essentially as gamers and stuff? Um, it just doesn't make much sense to implement a battle pass and everything anymore.
Mm,
Um, I get that PUBG and not Elden Ring, PUBG and Fortnite did it, and then like so many other games started doing it after that. I'm not pinning the blame on those two games in particular either, but the battle pass genre has become so overused. It's becoming stale,
mm,
and I don't like that games are now becoming stale because the battle pass genre is taking over. We don't need battle passes in every game. We just need a game that is in a playable state that has interesting gameplay, that will draw any player in, really. Um, like, is there a story for the game? Is the game fun? Like, what does the game have to offer that anyone could, use and draw from? Really, like, we don't have games like that anymore. Very rarely do we get a game like that. God
mm,
of War is a good example of that. Like, it's just purely focused on the story and gameplay. We don't need a battle pass for that. Spider-Man games as well, story and gameplay.
yeah.
Um, both the Dying Light games, there's no battle pass system for those two games. You just have DLC.
Mm,
And even then, it's just cosmetics and story stuff. And some of it's like from what I'm seeing at the moment, Dying Light 2, most of it has really just been um, just cosmetic free stuff now. A lot of free DLC is coming out. They fixed the game too. Like, DLC should be a little bit more prevalent than metal passes. We don't need in-game currency either. You don't need that. It's not a necessary thing to have. Um, we just need a game in a playable state that is fun.
mm.
And we can enjoy it. It's just hard to come by those games now. And going back to Need for Speed, like from what you've told me, the game still doesn't feel playable, and that's in regards to Unbound, which isn't a good sign.
I mean, like, it isn't necessarily unplayable, but there are certain flaws that just take you out of the immersion, right?
Mm.
The physics don't feel like they've been designed for the map that they have put out. or at
Yeah,
least the handling system isn't necessarily designed for the kind of actions that you're going to take. Especially taking into consideration that when you're crashing now, you just have to watch your car just flip over a bunch of times before actually getting back onto the race. Where
yeah,
in Heat, you were just fading to black and then you were back on the track again. And I feel like a lot of decisions are just they're just out of place. They really only hurt the game that could have been very great.
mm. Like, there's so much potential in gaming nowadays. Like Helldivers 2 is popular because it's so fun. Um, and I know I'm using that as an example, as the main example for this conversation, but like it is genuinely a fun game.
Mm.
It's in a, you know, I want to say a semi-playable state, and the developers have sunk so much time into it and so much effort into it that it's fun. Like people are genuinely enjoying it, and the amount of memes that have come from it, and the amount of new players that are coming to it. This game, Helldivers 2, has the potential to be game of the year due to the concurrent players.
Mm.
Um, and I think that says so much about the game too. Um, do we need to have battle passes in every game? Absolutely not. Do we need to have games in a playable state? Absolutely. Um, and I don't want people to think we have to go back to the early 2000s where games were pretty much unplayable, or games are being released once every year. There's always a sequel being released, and developers are being overworked. Like, by no means, don't do that. We could
Mm.
have a game every 3 years for the same game, or the franchise. As an example, Need for Speed. We could have a Need for Speed game every 3 years. I wouldn't mind, so long as it's playable, it has a good story to it, and the gameplay's fun. Um, I wouldn't mind it. But we've gone. When did Unbound come out? I want to say 2022, roughly.
It came out, let me not lie. It was November 22, I believe, yeah.
So it's been 2 years now, and that game is still receiving updates, which isn't bad, but not doesn't look like a fun game to play. I mean, me and my brother have both agreed not to buy it, and
Mm.
we have Game Pass, and it's free on Game Pass, so we're not going to
Wait,
be playing that game anytime soon.
is it?
Yeah, it's free
I've,
on Game Pass.
I haven't really seen it there.
It's kind of buried under everything else. It's under the EA Play, and once you have Game Pass, EA Play is readily available.
Hmm. I'll just check later. Because I
Yeah,
do know that Heat is on there. I mean, I'm quite
yeah,
literally playing Hot Pursuit Remastered at the moment.
yeah. Very glad that Hot Pursuit got remastered too. Very,
Mm,
very fun experience.
definitely. I feel like, and this is also a critique that I have in particular, is that Need for Speed, at least with the modern titles, isn't necessarily just like expanding on the gameplay itself. It's more or less like just putting down a setting that you can experience, and that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah,
All you're doing is essentially just driving some racetracks and getting money, getting upgrades, upgrading your car, getting into more races essentially with that, and more cop chases. Uh, yeah, something that I've just realized is that when it comes to Heat in particular, you have cop chases and or at least like high heat races where you can also get like high tier rewards.
mm.
And I think that in Unbound it was like specific ones that you could have or at least like unlock something. But when it came to Heat, and people if in the comment section can correct me if I'm wrong on here, but in Heat, once you've finished that race and you've gotten yourself that reward, you had to actually drive to your garage again in order to drop off that item and secure it. But in
Yeah, that actually was the case. Like that's what was really fun about Heat, though. You
mm,
had to drive back. You couldn't fast travel.
yeah, and in Unbound, I think it was not the case where you just you finished the race and that's it. You had that item.
Mm. See,
And
that's
I've
what we need, though.
mm,
We need that rewarding aspect. We need that reward.
mm,
Um, we need that accomplishment. Like, yes, I've got this like level 6 part for my car. Now I have it for every other car available, but I need the money to buy it. Right. What do I need to do? Oh, I need to drive back to my garage now, or any garage local. I'm not close to a garage. Right. I've got to avoid police now. Because they're going to be after me. They're going to be more frequent. Okay, how do I do that? That's what made it more rewarding because you had to
Mm.
actively hide and go to your garage. Otherwise, you couldn't do that.
Yeah. And also, what's interesting is that with Unbound, you can't pick whether or not you want to drive in the daytime or in the nighttime. When
Mm,
you are in like the week system that they've implemented, you are bound to essentially getting as much money as possible and low heat in the daytime because the heat carries over to the nighttime. But the day and night system just is on a string and it's linear. So, like I mentioned, you can't go back into the open world once you have entered your garage.
mm.
So, if you are actually going into your garage, then you're going into the next day essentially.
Interesting system. What can I say to that? Oh wow. Yeah, I think he did a lot of things right, but Unbound sort of didn't want to expand on that really,
Mm.
which is a shame because Unbound had a lot of potential. But like I said, with the art style, it's just interesting and fun and enjoyable. But like, well, at least it looks interesting, fun, and enjoyable. But you know, it wasn't.
I mean, it's not bad as you think. At least
Mm,
from my personal experience, I didn't mind it as much, and I think that some of the effects were actually pretty cool.
mm,
But I think that it would have been way better if they had gone with the entire game being cel shaded.
yeah, interesting art style choice, but not necessary
Mm,
because any game could be cell shaded, really.
yeah. What's also interesting, and I don't think we have touched upon that yet, is the music.
God, where do I even start? Terrible.
Well, I mean, it's not terrible per se. It's more or less it's not fitting for the game.
Mm,
And as you know, people have been criticizing and just memeing upon the entire soundtrack, comparing it to older games. And this stamped a couple of people that have seen these kinds of videos and decided to defend Unbound soundtrack.
right.
There's this one YouTuber called Jake MG that was like, why are people shitting basically on Unbound? I'm not word for word, but just like conveying the message that he's been trying to portray. Um, and he was basing his opinion off of another video that he has watched, where the guy was essentially saying, whenever I'm playing Need for Speed, I find myself going back to the playlist of older Need for Speed soundtracks and just enjoying it. And what he noticed was that most of the soundtrack usually just results in very old music and just either being some completely different genres like rock and uh, metal, reggae, and electronica, techno, whatever you want to name.
Mm,
Whereas Unbound is just hip hop.
yeah, I guess that could be due to ASAP Rocky's involvement though, because he's a hip hop artist and not like a rock artist. So maybe it's due to that, or there could be another reason for that. But I didn't find Heat's soundtrack to be very interesting either, to be honest.
Mm.
Um, I thought Heat's soundtrack was very lackluster.
I've I need to refresh my memory on the Heat soundtrack. I'm going to be
Yeah.
honest. I have not checked in with that game for a long time now. Um, But when it comes to Unbound, and also Jake's criticism, or at least like one of the arguments that he has brought out, was essentially like the diversity of the soundtrack itself, and just like how the game implements like different like nationalities and their rap culture or hip hop culture being the main focus of the soundtrack itself, right? You have
Mm.
German artists, you have Russian artists, Ukrainian artists, and etc., etc. And here's what I'm thinking, right? You're criticizing different genres for essentially like, being old, or people like having a better, or a different kind of taste, maybe outdated in your view, and saying, it's not as diverse as you think, maybe you also need to look and open your mind towards the newer soundtrack. But when you're basing your argument on the fact on a soundtrack that is having the diversity being portrayed in different languages and nationalities, uh, I don't think we're really taking the problem or the issue at hand, because rap isn't just based on languages.
Mm.
There are different subgenres to rap and hip hop. Like, quite literally, when Unbound was announced, or at least like pseudo announced, I'll say, what was the most trendiest genre at the time that you have seen on every single corner of social media?
It was pretty much hip hop, literally just hip hop, rap, and um, yeah. I just want to say it was hip hop mainly.
Mm.
Um, ASAP Rocky was a very trendy artist at the time, so you know I can understand why the devs naturally gravitated towards him being in the game. Uh, it was particularly hip hop that was advertised a lot during the time.
I wouldn't necessarily say hip hop and or that A$AP Rocky was trending at that time,
Mm.
but there is one specific subgenre of hip hop that was trending and still is trending. Actually, both of us are listening to it to this day.
Mumble rap.
No, not mumble rap, although
uh,
it's also a subgenre.
yeah, I can't remember the top of my head.
Funk.
Oh yeah, funk. Yeah, yeah. That's a good point.
It's quite literally a subgenre of Memphis rap. And Memphis rap is just like the southern version of hip hop during the
Mm.
80s and 90s. Like, quite literally, you had the best perfect fit that could have been utilized, because it was one of the trendiest things, and people have been using it left, right, and center in their mediums, in social media and also in real life. But you've decided to go with the diversity of internationality.
Yeah, I think the argument that realistically should be presented in this case, in particular, is does the music have to be trendy, and does it have to be um, interesting, really? Um, so, like, really, what the question I'm proposing is: does it have to be trendy to be included in the game,
No,
or
I
does
can
it have
already
to really stick out?
I, I
Really?
I can answer you that question, because there is one song in particular that I want to focus on, which is Shala by A$AP Ferg.
Mm,
You know when that song came out, right?
mm,
That song, I vividly remember it playing whilst I was getting out of my school educational system.
right.
That was almost 10 years ago.
Wow, what a time.
Exactly, what a time. So the music itself doesn't necessarily have to be trendy. And there is a weird selection that has been happening when it came to Unbound soundtrack in particular. Because
Mm,
if we're genuinely going by the criterion of, you know, is it trendy and is it falling into a genre that isn't necessarily defined by subgenres, but more or less something that is more popular, I'd say, then we can rule out that it's not going to be trendy and it doesn't necessarily have to be something that is essentially seen as fitting in a video game, or at least the setting that you're going for in the video game.
Right.
I mean, quite literally, and this is also something I'm still questioning. There is one Russian hip hop song that starts off with "Girlie wants pee pee." I kid you not, that is the quite literal word to word translation.
Wild. Absolutely wild. What do I even say to that?
So we can also rule out that profanity and just like the whole edginess, I'd say, is also not something that is hindering when it comes to the decision making.
Mm. It's just sort of, I guess, what we can say though is it's more so the developers are sort of picking and choosing random songs. Like they're just pushing randomize on a Spotify playlist, and they're like, "Yes, this sounds good. Let's implement it." You
Mm.
know, which is bad to do, especially for a game of the caliber of Need for Speed, where we had forgot the forgot the name of the band. For they had it in Need for Speed Most Wanted. Damn, I forgot the song too, but it wasn't Breaking Benjamin, I don't think.
No,
Might be
that
wrong.
was Halo. That was
Yeah,
Halo.
Halo's a good example actually. Breaking Benjamin in that game. Oh my god, when you got to that segment, just straight hype. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
exactly. And you know why?
Why is that?
Because it fits. It quite
Yeah,
literally fits, bro. The song is about like firing your gun, it's time to hold, blowing your way and whatnot, right? Only the
yeah,
strongest will survive. Quite literally, the song text is telling you, bro, beat these bitches into oblivion. Get them the fuck out of this fucking ring, man.
yeah, yeah. And that like that it appears on the it's not the Heretic mission or the Great Journey mission. I can't remember off the top of my head what mission it was, but it plays on the level where you're in High Charity,
Mm,
and the minute like a certain song hits in Need for Speed, you lock in. We
yeah,
don't have music like that anymore, where you can lock in.
yeah,
Um, you brought up a very good game to me a few days ago, Night Riders,
yeah. Night
um,
Runners.
or Night Runners, Night Riders, Night Runners. Yeah,
Yeah,
Night Runners.
same thing.
Yeah, I was going to say same thing pretty much. Um, Phenomenal game from what I've seen, and the music collection as well. That first song that played in the video you sent me was just phenomenal.
Yeah,
Very fun to listen to. Like it gets you in a good mood. It locks you in too. Like in Unbound, it feels like not many songs really want to help you lock in anymore. You
yeah.
know, it's weird.
I mean, man, here's one thing that I've just done outside. Like, I've played the Halo Infinite campaign. This is just getting a little bit off topic,
Mm,
but I essentially turned off the music and just had my own playlist play in the back. And
yeah.
there's this one band called Tool, and I'm going into the end segment of Halo Infinite, and there's just like very hard hitting dialogue, like coming from Cortana herself. You know, just Chief also going through some things of character development. And then you have Tool with Sober playing in the back, and I'm just sitting like, oh my fucking god, this is actually perfect.
Mm. Yeah, we definitely games need a more interesting collection now. Like we're addressing this issue, and it's more of a generalized thing. It's not just a Need for Speed issue, but like games need a more interesting collection of songs and something to get you in the mood. Like I'm a huge fan of the first Dying Light game,
Mm.
and you know how much I've played that game. I've played it so much. That main menu music it really hit. You know it's a horror game. You
Mm.
know it's a zombie game from the music. It's so somber and it's so wow. Um, it just sort of it is sort of like a wow thing. It like hits.
Yeah.
Um, and like even throughout the game, that song plays as well. Or that it's not even a song; it's like a sound. And when
Mm.
you're like parkouring, it plays too in Dying Light 2, and it's so interesting how it plays. Like it's just like a little soundtrack thing.
Mm.
And I'm not gonna hum it because I really can't remember off the top of my head, but it's really interesting, like when it plays and when it doesn't play.
Yeah.
You don't get that every game. You don't really get that in every game.
Yeah. Um, Correct me if I'm wrong, but you have this entire aesthetic and just the atmosphere being built on sound when it comes to Dying Light during the
Mm,
daytime, right?
yeah.
What happens when night falls?
Oh boy, it's a whole different game. Everything goes silent. Um, like that's just how I experienced the game. Like the darkness in the first Dying Light game, no music, you just hear yourself running, you hear volatile screaming in the background, you hear everything. It's insane. Even in the following DLC when it's night and you're driving your car, all you hear is the car. All you hear is
Mm.
the buggy. Sorry, it's not a car, but all you hear is the buggy.
Yeah.
That's it. You hear nothing else. And it's insane. Like genuinely insane. Like with it's the same with the second game, but to a much less degree, if you will.
Mm.
Um, I think the songs played are more often than not, and when it's night, it doesn't really feel like night in Dying Light 2. So it's one of those things, really.
Yeah. We've established that setting, and just like playing into that setting just is essentially the crux of what you're trying to imply, or at least like present, right?
Yeah.
Here's one interesting thing also. There's one game called Anarchy or Anarchy Reigns over here in the West. I'm not sure which one is for the Eastern side.
Mm,
But you remember from Unbound that once somebody say, "Hey, we want some money," thing, right?
mm.
Where everybody has been just shitting on it, just going, "Man, what the fuck is this bullshit?" On its own, I get that it's more or less a party song, but in the sense of it being a racing theme, it's not working. And in Max Anarchy, you have this one song where it's like, gotta get the cash, gotta get the dough, and the whole rhythm is just fast, and it's setting you up for essentially going very fast yourself.
Mm.
It has a different vibe to it, it has a different sound to it, at least, but it's also hip hop. That's the issue. In comparison of these two things, of these two songs, one is actually way more fitting. And the funny thing is that the song is actually used in the fighting game.
Oh man. Oh, what do I even say to that? there's like there's ways to there's context clues. I mean, with Hot Pursuit, when you're getting chased by the police, you have like a dramatic theme playing.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's like in Heat, or rather, in Heat is somewhat the same. But with Unbound, I don't know what it's like in Unbound when you're getting chased by the cops. But there was always
Mm.
a dramatic theme that played when you're being chased by the cops in um, uh, Most Wanted, Carbon, and Hot Pursuit, as well as Unbound, if I remember correctly.
Nah, Unbound just has whatever is playing in the back.
Yeah, I think it was Heat. I said Unbound, but I meant Heat.
Mm.
I can't remember the top of my head, but you kind of need that dramaticism
Mm.
um, in the game to sort of impact you a bit because it's you're getting chased. You
Yeah,
need to like getting chased essentially.
I mean, take into consideration how Pursuit in particular starts off with the title screen.
Mm.
I mean, you're quite literally getting blasted by "Stand Along."
Mm.
Whereas in Unbound, you have A$AP Rocky going, "Shit me, gotta be shitting me, hate me." I'm just sitting here like, what? Excuse me?
Mm.
What, what am I supposed to think of that?
It's just like squeaky rap pretty much. He's just squeaking. He's not like rapping. Um, which is weird because very boring for the
Mm.
main one. Very boring.
I'm just saying, A$AP Rocky was not the call to do. No association with color culture whatsoever. Completely out of left field. And, you know, just a weird decision overall.
Mm. Did not need to happen with A$AP Rocky. Could have got an actual car, but I'd like to under the creator. Oh no.
You know, there's one thing I've forgotten to say as we were talking about like the music decision and all, and just like how developers were picking and choosing songs. Sweet Baby Ink. Bro, EA is quite literally a customer of Sweet Baby Ink.
Please get rid of that company. Please. Get rid of them. They don't need to be here.
I'm thinking that they have had a hand when it comes to music.
Next thing you know, they're going to be putting Baby Shark into the game.
Honestly speaking, that would have been way better than whatever we have in Bound. I'm serious. When the drift events, hearing "Baby Shark" as I'm doing fucking 80s.
Like dropping the hardest drift over here is Baby Shark, and it's just like a trap remix.
You'll be surprised to hear that I've actually listened to "Sweet Little Bumblebee" as a funk remix, and it actually goes hard when you're driving through the fucking city.
See, that would have been more interesting. Like a lot more interesting in the game.
Mm.
Just the funk version of Sweet Little Bumblebee, and you just got like Yang in the background. Just oh man. There's so much more we could address about the Need for Speed franchise as a whole currently, like how lackluster the story is.
I mean, the story never really has been that, strong, I would say, in any
Yeah.
of the Need for Speed. It had like wacky story elements and just like some jank to it. It had charm though, unlike with Unbound. You know, I'm serious. In the script, I also say that in Unbound there is only one likable character, which is Red,
Mm.
who is seen as like the father figure that has taken you in, and another orphan, and showing you the ropes of like mechanical systems and just in car mechanics as a whole. And then every other character just seems like a cardboard version of like one personality. You have Tess, who is a wannabe social influencer. You might have seen the cutscene where she's getting introduced, where she's quite literally going to, and I kid you not, she's like, and I went, bro, and you know what, bro? Uh, so like, yo,
God, that made me cringe.
Yep. That's quite literally it. Rydell literally has a personality to him that I think you and I can relate to, where it's a
Mm.
boomer trying to figure out new modern technology and trying to also reflect on themselves to some degree.
Yeah,
He is sticking to the old school ways that he has been taught. He is this wise guy that actually is giving you proper tips and saying, listen, don't go over there. Uh, You don't want to be involved with these guys. Trust me, they're nothing but bad news. And he is also having a more pessimistic view, I would say, on things, but he tries to be better. He tries to improve
yeah.
on his character and he is trying to open up, seeing what the world is all about, or at least like what the world of the new generations is.
It's like EA are just trying to say, "Hey, Need for Speed old heads. Here's a guy who's also an old head." Like, excuse me.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it feels like that, to be honest.
I get it. I'm old. Like, come on. I'm 22. I grew up on these games. Come on, man. I'm not that old. Oh man. Yeah, you're doing being a different breed as per usual. Throwing insults as per usual.
Well, not really insults. Rydell's character is actually pretty great. I must
Mm,
say that he is probably the best character in Unbound.
yeah.
Whereas when it comes to main bad guy, who is called Alec, you don't even get to see him. He's only mentioned, and then when you actually beat the story, all you hear is that he has probably gone broke over, losing the bet on your side. That's pretty much it. You never get to see him. There is no building, no villain arc whatsoever that we had with, for instance, Razor or Darius.
Oh my god. You got Darius, who's like top tier manipulator. Kind of knew he was the villain from the start, but top tier manipulator. Gaslit you into believing something.
I mean, hey,
Right? It's coming.
I mean, without Darius, we would have never gotten Most Wanted.
Oh yeah. I love how they expanded on that story, but Leave for Speed needs to head in a better direction. Like
Hmm.
a much better direction than what it has been. There's so much they could do with these games as well, which I think we'll need to touch on next time. Um, like what we could see in a future Need for Speed installment,
Hmm. I think
and what
that.
we
Go on.
I was going to say what else we could envision for the future of other like Need for Speed games, or where we could go with them really.
Honestly, I do have a couple of ideas, but they're
Mm.
more or less multiplayer like centric, I would say. But they could possibly also work in a single player setting. It's essentially
Anything with
just like,
single player.
I mean, yeah, but like as I mentioned, it's more or less a combination of old school games being like having different traits that made them unique.
Mm.
Like for instance, as you know, when in the new Need for Speed you're doing certain aspects, you get a point system to your reputation and all, right? Still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm listening.
As I mentioned, you have this whole reputation system.